Okay, same principle that I applied in the malfoof, I want to apply it in the maqsoom, just to see how this intense feeling happens out of the qarshi versus the sparse qarshi. Right, this is baladi or maqsoom. Or saidi. So you see, it's the sparse qarshi, you know. And by adding this extra tech here that happens, that says fast one, so you have to get used to this. It makes a 4 sound kind of roll. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then when you speed it up, and again remember, it's gonna count on the flexibility of your finger, how to do that. And at the same time, just to see that there are the other aspects, you can do it with 2 fingers. When you play the qarshi, if you play the qarshi with 2 fingers, you still can do the same thing. Or even do it with the Turkish style, or the modern style. See the point? Or same thing here on the older Arabic Turkish style. So just ideas here, see the right hand more, pay attention to the right hand, how it does the extra sound. You know. Or, okay, cool, so that's the explanation to it. If I do it again. You can carry it on within the beat itself as an ornament, like a whole ornament. And then it can be used on also higher speeds, like if we do it in the ends of fallahi, a lot of time you can do it at the ends of fallahi. For example, going this way. See the point behind it? So that's this nice qarshi, and again it takes more discipline and flexibility in the finger and flexibility here to be able to produce it versus. Okay, that's for the use of this kind of qarshi. Friends, I want to talk deeper about the use of the Tuqqa sound, besides it being a replacement for the tek when you play the beats, like when you play maqsoom, for example. You know. This is one thing, like that's a good standard to go to, but once you start knowing how to use it for ornaments and just to explore the different sounds that you can make, the different tones. See the point behind it, and how it changes tone between using like the fingers, the middle finger, you know. And then its relationship with the idea of this muting and playing within the structure itself, you know what I mean? So let's say if we play the wahda with just regular tek. Okay, and then sometimes when you start being able to do, for example, this kind of trick. See? It goes to this. So the main thing to pay attention to here is the idea of tek and Tuqqa, tek and tuq. And then of course the left hand also, how is it corresponding to that. So being able to do dum, ka, dum, tek, and then mute, and then again tek and mute, dum, tek, just this idea of the right hand. You see, it's always, it comes back always to the idea of flexibility and the flexibility of the right hand between the dum and the shambar and the tek, So, another example, just to give you an example, this idea here. A lot of us, we do this for dancing sometimes and things like that. So we do in the mute, but also like when everything is here, But sometimes when you flip it over, you see how it gives you a bit of a different effect. It's no matter what, it will give you a different sound because it's a tek here versus this here. And this, again, this flexibility required when you do things like this, So it's always about, again, this. See, changing sounds and just being able to come back to this maneuver here. And then when you become more flexible and your finger can do qarshi rolls and things like that, you start incorporating that with this. And then this kind of tripleted movement. If I apply it in the wahda kabira, see the idea? And then you start choosing which finger to mute with. Depends sometimes on what's the easiest versus. See how much flexibility now you need to be able to correctly position here. And then see, just to the tip of the finger. In most cases, when you play fast this way, the tips of the fingers are the most advisable to be played with. But you have to take your time to really make the accurate and good sound. Okay, so we see the incorporation of this Tuqqa. I can just keep showing things, for example, like doing this. This is a very common movement a lot of people do. So if you do it with different tension for different mutes, see, a whole mute or partial mute. So when you do, and then you do, but at the same time you notice how you pursue this. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So two tones. If you're able to get those two. With the time, also your hand, you'll notice like you need the more development in the hand. In the beginning, it's not easy to be able to, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, this idea. And the hand develops, everything here starts developing and becomes easy to do this, to lift, and still mute correctly. So it's, again, it goes back to the correct approach, Again, you get so many tones, at least if you get two of them, just to begin with, and then you discover. But for this movement in particular, it has only the two sounds. You have the flick, 2, 3, flick, 2, 3. Just, they make a lot of difference. See? Okay, all these different things, if you can see them and play them, you can just it will give you this feeling. Change the tone. One of the moves that I like personally, I like to play it sometimes when the beat is slow, like if I play maqsoom and just apply it, it's very sparse and you'll hear it without the beat, but when there's a maqsoom underneath, it's really sweet, but this way. Sweetness of the change of the tone and waiting for the beat to flow and work with it. And again, this is such a good mechanic to be able to use throughout your playing. It's really, a good tool. I'm just going to demonstrate and play around with the Tuqqa and different beats and see how that sound. Okay. Okay, this one will be about talking about the same principle that we talked about in the playing when you do the qarshi, when you apply it. Same thing applies here with the dirbaki when you put your qarshi within the beats of wahda and maqsoom and all these beats. And again, just to be mindful of how important it is to be precise about it, because it really can delay your beat or can rush your beat if you're not accurate about this. Because remember, you're fitting two fast sounds in one small space, so it shouldn't take much, So when you play, for example, in the Wahda Kabira, you get to know that there are a couple of different standard approaches. One of them is the qarshi immediately after the dum, or the one with the pause. Okay, and then. And of course you can do it with other fingers. Okay, that's for the qarshi in the other beats and the dirbaki in particular. So just to be mindful of having those two things. And I will again re-emphasize the idea, especially when you play a main beat and you try to put that qarshi in. See always how you don't compromise the space. Let the dum, fit them correctly, but don't compromise the dum and the beat. Because remember, now you are splitting the space between the dum and those two sounds. So how can they correspond in a correct way? I talked earlier about using the intense qarshi in different beats that we do, like maqsoom or other beats, you know, it has this pressure to it. See this extra tech here where it makes the... Okay, so what I wanted to add to that also now, the other ways of being able to do fast rolls within a slow beat. That's depends on two things: your understanding of beat and how to divide speeds, and how flexible you are to make that thing happen. I'll just explain to you, like if I'm going... This is fairly slow, not too right, but if you notice the rolls that I did, I was able to do 2 rolls within the time just by being able to apply the energy. So just the basic idea of the discipline, you know, getting the slow feel. Before also about the idea of keeping the other feelings while you play. If you play maqsoom, just keep in mind that you can switch into malfoof immediately and come back to maqsoom by knowing how to divide the time. So the idea about the feeling of the malfoof is not playing exactly the malfoof on the drum, but the way it's divided, right? Versus the maqsoom. So this is a very good thing to be able to be aware of, you know, that you have this, the other feeling can't go hand in hand with the maqsoom feel, and vice versa. And then you can always make some ornament or like, you know, things, embellishments around the beat because of being able to access this speed, you know, between the slow and the fast. And then maybe even more of the intense rolls can be inserted there when you can do them. If you're like, I'll try to do an example. So this is a capability that you really have to be flexible and ready for. As you can see, I'm still stuttering when I'm doing it, but then once you get to that final flow, so you fill in the space with this precise time. See? The idea is really something to behold, to be able to do 5 count roll, whole one in this case. And that's more than 5 counts, so you see, you can go back and forth, but even a straight 5 count roll there can be really intense. Okay, so that's a basic explanation about the use of this different speed. Physically, try to be able to do that, to jump on from one speed to the other and still keep your balance.